Hello, dear. Welcome. Come on in. Are you cold? Here, I'll wrap this nice warm blanket around you. Please sit by the fire. It should be nice and toasty. I just made some hot cocoa and soup. It's warming on the stove. I will bring you some. There you go. I love this time of year. The cool, crisp air, the smell of autumn leaves and pumpkins. But my favorite part is staying up late at night until the sky is black with just a few speckles of stars. When the moon is full, when the crickets are singing their tunes, when the fire is crackling, and when I can curl up on a comfy sofa and read some cozy fairy tales. You know, the ones your parents or teachers read to you as children that made you feel warm and happy. Would you like to hear some of them? Of course. Let me see. How about these? Fairy tales for the modern age. These are not the outdated, flowery stories that you may have read as children, nor do they push unhealthy stereotypes and gender roles. Indeed, they represent the diversity of the human experience, the virtues we should all strive to express, and the goodness of the spirit. Well, let us begin with one of the most famous stories, The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, there was a mama duck who sat on her nest of eggs, dreaming of when her babies would hatch. She dreamed of what her little ducklings would look like. She hoped for an even number of girl and boy ducklings. The girls would be beautiful and feminine, and the boys would be strong and masculine. One day, her eggs began to hatch, and her ducklings were everything she dreamed of. Well, that is, except for one. For one of the birds was an odd-looking thing. It wasn't beautiful and dainty like the girl babies, but it wasn't strong and masculine like the boy babies. Indeed, it wasn't like anything the mama duck had ever seen. One of the boy ducklings pointed. "What is that? He cannot be one of us." And one of the girl ducklings pointed. "I have never seen such an ugly duckling." The mother didn't know what to say, so she just instructed her ducklings to follow her to the lake for their first swim. As the ducklings followed the mother, they quacked, "Ugly, ugly, ugly." The ugly duckling didn't know why their brothers and sisters yelled at them like that. They just took their last spot in the line. After they crossed the lake, the ducklings began to play with each other, but they wouldn't play with the ugly duckling. "Go away," they yelled. "We will not play with you. You're weird. You're not like us." Mama Duck scolded her children and told them to be nice, but she was not always close by. So one day, while she was away, one of the ugly duckling's siblings told them to leave, that they didn't belong. The ugly duckling didn't know why they couldn't stay with their siblings, why the ugly ducklings were so mean to them. Perhaps there was something wrong with them. So the ugly duckling left and flew to the other side of the lake. Soon they had met some older ducks. "Can I stay with you?" they asked. "Fine," the older duck said, "but only if you can help us protect the others. Are you a boy duck?" The ugly duckling thought for a moment. "No," they answered, "I'm not a boy duck." "Then you cannot stay," the older duck answered. So the ugly duckling wandered for a while and came across an old woman. "Can I stay with you?" the ugly duckling asked the woman. She looked the duckling up and down. "Only if you can lay some eggs," the woman replied. "I need more eggs. Are you a girl duck?" The ugly duckling thought a moment. "No, I am not a girl duck," they answered. "Then get out of here," the old woman hissed. The ugly duckling walked away with a tear in their eye. "Nobody wants me," they thought. "Nobody likes me. Why don't they like me?" The ugly duckling felt different, but they didn't know why that was such a bad thing. They couldn't help it if they weren't like the other ducklings. So the ugly duckling walked and walked until they came upon a new lake. Looking into the water, the ugly duckling saw the reflection of large white birds flying overhead. They were the most beautiful birds they had ever seen. They were not like their brothers and sisters. They were something else entirely. The beautiful birds landed on the lake and looked up at the ugly duckling. "Do not worry," the ugly duckling said to them, holding out one wing. "I will go now. I will not make trouble for you." The ugly duckling turned to go away, but as they did, they caught their reflection in the water. It was a reflection of one of those beautiful white birds. The ugly duckling jumped back, and the reflection jumped back too. "What is this?" the ugly duckling wondered. The ugly duckling stretched their neck, and so too did the reflection. "Why are you going so soon?" said one of the beautiful birds. "Stay here with us. We'll be great friends." "But I don't belong with you," the ugly duckling remarked. The beautiful bird smiled. "Sure you do. You're one of us." And that is when the ugly duckling realized that they were not an ugly duckling after all, but a beautiful swan. At one moment, all the swans flapped their wings and took off into the sky. "Come with us," they called back. "You take the lead." So the ugly duckling, who was now a swan, flapped their wings fast and took their place in front of the whole flock, finding a family at last. Wasn't that a lovely story? Shall we read another one? How about The Frog Prince? Once upon a time, there was a wealthy princess who lived in a large castle with her mother and father. The princess's most favorite possession in the entire world was a golden ball that her parents gave to her. Every day she would gaze into the ball and wish upon it for a friend. Sure, the princess had friends, but so many of them were selfish and vain. They cared nothing for her, but simply visited the castle to enjoy the food her chef prepared, enjoy the guest rooms the castle offered them, and play with her toys. No, she thought, she wanted a friend that liked her and not what she had. One day, the princess was traveling with her parents into the town. She spotted some poor children begging on the street and reached down to give them a coin from her pocket. But her mother scolded her, and her father ripped the coin out of her hand. "You must never give to them," her mother warned. "Why not?" the princess asked, puzzled. "Because," her mother answered, "they will not be grateful. If we give them money, they will just ask for more, or they will spend it on frivolous things." "Besides," her father added, "we are the richest family in all the land for a reason. We save our money. We do not give it away to others." The princess didn't understand. If they had so much money, and others had so little, why couldn't they help? But her parents warned her again never to give away her money or possessions to those that were not in her circle. At that moment, there was a large bang, and the carriage came to a halt. Her father got out to inspect and found that the carriage wheel was broken. While her parents and the driver attempted to fix the carriage, the princess decided to go down to a nearby pond. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the pond was crystal clear. The princess gazed into the pond at her reflection. She was surprised to see that the girl who stared back at her looked sad and forlorn. As she bent over the pond, the golden ball that was in her pocket fell into the water and sank to the bottom. The girl cried out and tried to reach the ball, but the pond was too deep. The princess was very sad and wept openly. "What's the matter, little girl?" someone called to her. She turned and saw a boy her age was staring back at her. His hair was dirty, he was caked in mud, and his voice croaked and strained. "Who are you?" the princess asked. The boy smiled. "I'm a prince," he proclaimed proudly, his hands on his hips. "Can't you tell?" The princess eyed him wearily. "What's wrong with your voice?" The boy touched his throat. "My throat is sore from all the yelling. I work down at the market, selling the fish that I catch in the pond. I scream out my prices to attract passerbys. By the end of the day, my voice is all but lost." "That's terrible," the princess replied. "It must hurt your throat." The boy shrugged. "Yes, but the louder I scream, the more buyers I attract, and the better I eat. Yesterday, I even sold enough to eat some of my own catch. The trout in this pond are delicious." Suddenly, the princess remembered her lost ball. "Please," she asked, "my golden ball, my most favorite thing in all the world, has fallen into this pond. Can you help me retrieve it?" The boy thought a moment. "I can," he finally answered, "but you must do something for me in return." "Anything," the princess exclaimed. "You must take me to your castle and give me a hearty meal, a warm bed to sleep in, and one more thing, which I will tell you after I receive those two. Do you agree?" The princess thought a moment. She remembered what her parents had warned her about not giving anything to those poorer than she. But on the other hand, she really wanted her ball back. "Okay," she answered. "I agree." "You promise?" the boy asked. "Yes," the princess replied. "I promise." The boy grabbed a fishing pole that was lying against a nearby tree. With surgeon-like precision, he retrieved her golden ball. The princess thanked him profusely. "Now remember," he reminded her, You promised." The princess nodded, and by the time they walked back to the carriage, it was fixed. When the princess told her parents what she had promised, they were furious. "We will not let this dirty boy into our home," they said. "What if he has a disease or steals something?" But the princess said she would not go back on her word, and so her parents begrudgingly agreed. They took the boy back to their castle and served him a hearty meal as he asked for. The boy ate greedily and sloppily, which made the princess laugh. He enjoyed the food so much, which was a stark change from her parents, who complained to the chef about every perceived mistake. Her parents ordered the guards to give the boy a bath, then take him to the farthest room in the castle and stand guard to ensure he did not leave. The boy was unfazed and skipped happily to his new room. That night, the princess laid in her bed, wondering what the boy was up to and what his third wish would be. Curious, she sneaked out of her room and into his. The guards had fallen asleep, so she was able to enter quietly. She found the boy laying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. "Hey," he exclaimed happily, "welcome to my room." "What are you doing?" she asked. "Oh, just thinking of how lucky I am. Before I met you, I was hungry, thirsty, and didn't even have a bed to call my own. And now look at me. I'm full, clean, and comfortable. Thank you for keeping your promise." The princess smiled. It made her feel good to see him so happy. And she noticed that his voice was less squeaky, and with his hair clean and a new set of clothes, he looked like any boy that she'd meet at school. The princess and the boy spent the rest of the night telling stories and making shadow puppets. The boy told her tall tales of being a famous prince from a faraway land. He told her he had gotten lost on an expedition and found his way to this land years ago. He had lived on the streets ever since, relying on his wits and quick thinking to survive. The princess thought he was lying, but she laughed and listened all the same, for she greatly enjoyed his company. They spent the next week playing around the castle. Through his eyes, the princess found joy in what her home, which was once cold and lonely, could offer to a child such as them. One day, they spotted a wide procession of carriages coming down the street towards the castle entrance. Stepping out of an opulent carriage was a couple garnished with gold crowns and bejeweled costumes. "Greetings," the man said with a bow. "I am King Sing. I've come searching for my son." The king smiled widely when he saw the boy. The boy ran into his parents' arms and embraced. The princess's parents were shocked. "He's your son?" The king nodded. "Yes, he has been missing for some time, but you have kept him safe, and for that you will be awarded richly." The princess pulled the boy aside. "So you were telling the truth. You are a prince." "Of course," the boy said. "I wouldn't lie to you." The boy pulled the princess aside. "I still need to ask you to fulfill my third wish," he said, but I'm afraid you will say no." The princess grew serious. "Well, if you don't ask," she told him, "you'll never know what I'll say." The boy thought that over and nodded. "You're right. Okay, here is my third wish. Will you be my friend?" The princess smiled wide. "Of course," she answered. "You're already my friend." And the prince and princess stayed great friends for the rest of their lives. The end. Our next story is a story of Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a kind and hard-working girl named Cinderella. She lived with her stepmother and many step and half siblings. Her stepmother worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet and was hardly ever home. Many of her siblings also had to work, and the others were left on their own. So Cinderella took it upon herself to care for the little ones, to cook their meals, clean the house, and mend their clothes. She often went to bed hungry, for there was not enough food to feed everyone. Still, Cinderella didn't mind helping her family and worked diligently every day. But Cinderella did wish for one thing. More than anything, she wished to go to school. But Cinderella didn't know where to start. She had never gone to school before, and she had to take care of the little ones. Plus, how could she afford the school clothes, the textbooks, the transportation? Someday, Cinderella thought, but not today. And so she went back to her chores and cared for her family. Years went by, and Cinderella was now a grown woman. Her siblings had grown and left, and she now had children of her own. She was happy, but every now and then she would be reminded of her childhood dream. She made a vow that even though she didn't reach her dream, maybe her children could. So she worked hard and saved up and finally had enough money to send her children to school. She delighted in hearing their stories of making friends and learning new things. She tried to help them with their homework, but often struggled. Still, she persevered, learning to read along with them. And she was the proudest mother in the world when her children graduated school. Years later, her grandchild told her of a magical place where she could learn new things and explore all fascinating subjects for free. It was called a library. Cinderella had certainly heard about the library, but there never seemed to be enough time to visit. But now her children were grown, and she finally had the time. So she visited this magical place and spent weeks reading every book she could get her hands on. She delighted in reading tales of knights and pioneers, books that teach one how to use a computer or build a cabinet, and books on tape that taught her how to speak in various languages. She spent every waking moment in that library until one day she ran out of books to read. So she approached the librarian and asked her for more books. The librarian asked her a question. "What do you most wish to learn about?" And Cinderella replied, "Everything." The librarian nodded knowingly and handed her an application. It was an application to attend night school. Could you imagine, Cinderella thought, a school at night for people my age? But Cinderella shook her head. She could never afford it. The librarian just smiled and told Cinderella not to worry, that she had a bit of magic she could work. And with that, the librarian took Cinderella under her wing and helped her fill out the application, along with many scholarship and financial aid applications. And so, with the help of her fairy godmother, Cinderella went to school, then to college, and learned more than she could have ever dreamed of. The end. Well, those are our modern-day fairy tales. They tell us tales of the world we live in, and they remind us to stay courageous in the face of bigotry and judgment, that someday we will find our clan, to be charitable and generous, for when we give, we receive bounties in return. And they remind us to keep hope alive, that justice will prevail if we hold strong to our values. And now, I invite you to curl up in front of the fire, to listen to the crackling of the wood, and to dream of a world where virtue prevails and happy endings are not far out of reach. Good night.